I am Larry Diamond, Senior Fellow here at Hoover, and I'm joined by my co-chair of the project on Taiwan in the Indo-Pacific region, Admiral James Ellis. It is our great pleasure this morning for the Hoover Institution and the project to welcome here to Hoover and to Stanford, one of Taiwan's most distinguished diplomats of recent decades. He is Representative Alexander Ta-Rei-Yu, who assumed his position as head of the Taipei Economic and Cultural Representative Office, otherwise known as TECRO, in Washington, D.C. in December 2023. He previously served in a similar role as representative to the European Union and Belgium. I wish we could just dispense with this representative stuff and call you Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you, sir.
But in fact, I will note he has the rank of ambassador, so I may refer to him from time to time as ambassador, and I hope I won't cause a diplomatic crisis by doing that. His 35-year career in Taiwan's foreign service has included appointments to posts in New York, San Salvador, and Geneva, and most recently a 3-year term as ambassador to Paraguay. And from 2021 to 2023, he served as Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs. Mr. Ambassador, before we begin, if I may, I would like to thank TICO in San Francisco and your colleagues for your generous support of our program. I'd like to welcome the Director General of TICO San Francisco, Mr. Scott Lai. Thank you for your all your support and partnership, and the Deputy Director, our closest partner, Yuling Hung, for her support and her assistance in arranging this. I think this is now something like the 17th or 18th year of a program at Stanford, one part of the campus or another, but for a number of years now based at Hoover, focused on Taiwan, its democracy, its security, and many of the issues you're going to address us with. So, Representative Yu, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Lyman, for your very kind words for introduction, and Admiral Ellis. I'm very honored to count on your presence, especially someone who has been involved personally in the affairs of our peace, stability in the Taiwan Straits under your command. And today, for me, it's like going to an orals exam, because you are the experts on the area in the Pacific. As you said, you've been devoting a lot of time and over almost 20 years on the subject. So who am I to tell you what the state of affairs are between Taiwan? I think you probably know more than I do. I may know a few things about what's happening currently, but it's a pleasure to be at Stanford Hoover Institute for the first time. One of the things I've been trying to do since I arrived December 2023 is also do some reaching out. My work is very heavy in Washington, D.C., especially now. So we're waiting our turn to get our terms settled down with the current administration. President Trump has called out Taiwan by name several times, probably once a couple of weeks. And obviously, we're trying to make sure that the strong bonds that exist between Taiwan and the United States continues to be, and I'm sure it will be. It's a matter of getting to terms and reaching a consensus on how we will proceed from the years ahead. But I prepared a very layman's terms introduction. I showed this to the West Point cadets last week.
Oh.
And so it's just a very simple thing, pictures are basically easy to understand concepts of what
you're talking to Army folks, so that makes sense.
Yes, well, yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Just remember who sailed into the Taiwan Strait in 1996.
But my son is a graduate of West Point, so it's all in the family. So.
The United States, I've been very impressed with you because reading the history. I wore your uniform once. You remember? I went to high school at the Panama Canal Zone.
Ah.
When at the DODDS high school, which is
right
for Army brats, and I joined JROTC and learned everything about leadership and command and initiative, and so. But I've been very impressed with the United States, role in the world ever since you were a young republic. You started to deal with things overseas on your own terms. Early 1800s, and you already sent the USS Constitution to fight the pirates in northern Africa to make sure that they wouldn't, ask you for bribery in your ships, merchant ships, or enslave your sailors, and you did it on your own terms. But since then, you've been very active in world affairs, be it World War I, World War II, but also you've been also very involved with us, with the pre-World War II, when we were defending ourselves against the invasion from the Japanese Empire. You had sent volunteers led by then Colonel and later General Claire Chennault. So under this spirit, we've been together working tirelessly to keep the way of life that we both cherish. But PRC, again, there's been periods of different way United States approached mainland the People's Republic of China, or CCP particularly. There were some times where United States thought that you could get them to your side to counter the Russians or the Soviets, and think that by embracing them into your way of doing things, for example, allowing them to join WTO 25 years ago or so, that they will learn the way of trading under clear rules and order and etc. But fundamentally, they won't change, and fundamentally, their final objective of toppling democracy, capitalism, that won't change, and their final objective of getting Taiwan into their realm will not change. Whatever, we have some periods of times that we were in good terms, calling we're all family. During President Ma's 8 years of government, and things look very rosy. There were 1,000 flights a week between Taiwan and China, mainland China. And there were a lot of investments between our two sides, or specifically from Taiwan to mainland China. But they were, as many explain it, was slow cooking the frog. They were in good terms with Taiwan, but they were, their final objective, getting us eventually into their realm, never changed. So you've all experienced maybe, say 5 years ago, this very obnoxious Chinese diplomats, but now they start to charm you again, from a Wolf Warrior diplomacy. And last year they introduced a couple of pandas, and all of a sudden, Xie Feng, the ambassador, who was not very loved in Washington, now he's a very popular figure because he brought a couple of pandas. But again, don't be fooled. They're still the same people. They're just changing their tactics, smiley and accessible, but they're the same people. So, and I say that, raison tactics. Again, they use all forms of. We've been under their threats constantly. Whenever we do something they don't like, they stop importing pineapples, or when Australia wanted to create a commission to investigate the source of COVID, which was pointing towards mainland China, they stopped importing lobsters, wine from Australia, and coal, and etc. So we would call it for example, the pineapples, we would call it freedom pineapples, because once they stopped buying pineapples, the Japanese started buying our pineapples. And once China stopped importing Australian wine, we started buying, in large quantities, our Australian wine. And at the foreign ministry, we would always serve only Australian red freedom wine. But also, in Lithuania, when they established offices, mutually established offices between Taiwan and Lithuania, they stopped importing everything on Lithuania, and these are type of coercion. But it's not limited on Taiwan issues. They do that with Argentina and Brazil. Whenever they don't like the terms, they stop, for whatever reason, start buying soybean or beef, etc. So that's one of the things they do. Drills, I think I don't have to say much about this, but they're constant, especially after Speaker Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. They've been very actively encroaching on Taiwan's space around Taiwan. Military ships, planes, no longer recognize the median line that exists on the Taiwan Straits, and it's a daily occurrence. Sometimes at one point there were like 90 Navy surface ships around Taiwan. That was happening in December of last year, around Taiwan, around near Japan and near the Philippines. But this ambitious is not only about Taiwan; it's about the whole region, about Indo-Pacific. They've been holding military drills around Taiwan unannounced recently, but they also had this flash live fire maneuvers near the coast, off the coast of Australia recently. So again, their ambitions goes way beyond just coastal defense or Taiwan Straits, which in itself is very important. As you know, over 50% of world trade goes through the Taiwan Strait. But I want to appreciate your efforts to maintain the Taiwan Straits international navigation by way of phone ops, and I'm sure you've commanded many of those. But it is very important. Coercion, my 35 plus years at the foreign ministry has been countering diplomatic coercion, especially trying to safeguard our increasingly lower number of diplomatic allies. We're down to 12 diplomatic allies, but at the same time, we've earned a lot of friends, who recognize who we are. The United States has been constant, but the recognition of who we are has increased considerably the last few years. Same with Europe, European Union, many of the countries that 5 years ago would not talk. In Europe, you wouldn't talk about Taiwan at all, say 5 years ago. Even if it was mentioned, it was because it had to do something with mainland China. But nowadays, when I was in EU 2023, it was easy to talk about bilateral issues between Taiwan and Europe or a particular country without even mentioning PRC. So that has changed considerably in the last few years. Cyber attacks, it's part of the gray zone tactics that mainland China does. As you also are very aware of this, the getting into your critical infrastructure, messing with the cyber world, and maybe stealing data and all of that. So you're also very aware of what's happening. I think there was a Netflix movie on that recently. It's called Zero Day. Yeah. Which also Taiwan is, I think somebody's filming a movie called 0 Day also, something about Taiwan, Chinese invasion of Taiwan. But anyways, these are the things that PRC is devoting massive amounts of resources in trying to mess with us if there is ever a full-scale conflict between our two sides, to render immobilize how you move in your country. And this information, lots of that, during our elections of 2024 last year, before and after, then during, we had plenty of this information going, campaign on our election, trying to dissuade our electorate on who they should vote for, but also invading us with messages of we call it Doubt America theory. The United States that it was an election about choosing sides between choosing United States or choosing PRC, and the ruling party was basically siding with United States, which was a very unreliable partner. Look at Vietnam, look at Afghanistan, look at the United States was willing just to sell us very expensive weapons that don't arrive. But once conflict starts, you will nowhere see the Americans nearby, because all they want to do is just make some profit and run to the other market, etc. So there were lots of that during, but obviously we've also countered that with lots of whenever the debunking disinformation is one way that we learn that's very important, and as quickly as possible. Once we notice there's some information that is fake or not correct, to publicly tell the audience, the public, that this is not this, or even we have President Tsai on video speaking on something that she has never done. So we educate our public. If you see something that's not right, then it's probably not real. But that has been a constant thing, and now, especially now, also with what's happening in the United States, with very active happenings with the United States and Europe and other parts of the world, and then the Chinese PRC are seeding us with this disinformation about U.S. So they take advantage of every occasion to seed this doubts about who our friends really are. And this is just a picture of any other day in Taiwan, where the Chinese military's presence around Taiwan is constant. They basically are surrounding Taiwan, and as Admiral Paro has said maybe last week, that these are not military exercises. These are rehearsals for an eventual if they do so. Obviously, therefore we have to be very firm in our determination to counter any possibility of attacks against Taiwan. We're learning a lot about the different ways of doing war, or the doctrines of war. We basically are changing our way of doing things in the military, particularly. In the military, very strong on tradition, and our military that came with Chiang Kai-shek from mainland China, from the Huangpu Academy. We've been trying to reform and bring some new ideas on island defense instead of continental warfare that they used to in the past. And we're doing that quite effectively, especially with our first truly civilian Minister of Defense, Wellington Koo, which I think you've met.
We did meet him very recently.
Yeah, but this is a fundamental change in how Taiwan is dealing with the threats, asymmetric warfare, gray zone tactics, and also reserves, especially our reserves. We're revamping our reserves very seriously. Used to be just a formality, but now we want to make them a credible and a good supplemental defense force against any eventual attacks. And I use this, when I went to high school in the U.S. In the U.S. territory. I went to school in the United States, so I grew up watching series, Star Trek, but then you start thinking, when I'm watching Star Trek, you relate to, Captain Kirk and Spock, and this character is about spreading, the humanity, human values in the universe, rationale and some good values. So you would identify with them in this series. But as I think, if Xi Jinping is watching this series, who would he identify with this? Which is basically these characters are the symbolize what United States is. Was Xi Jinping's identify with these characters, or no? I think he identifies with this guy, the cyborgs. because he's trying to assimilate the world into his realm, on his way of thinking, you know. And then if you don't assimilate, then he'll destroy you. That's exactly what the cyborgs do, and the series. So that's my thought of. What I always say is, don't be fooled. You know, we think differently. We're not the same. You know, so just this very simple TV series. When you're saying, you know, say you're hurraying for Captain Kirk, he's hurraying for the cyborg. So, you know, we're totally different people. And again, this is just, again, for those of you who didn't recognize Captain Kirk, the younger ones, this is Captain Kirk. and Spock, you know, Zachary Quinto and what's his name, but again, these are just in a very simple comparison of, we're very different, you know, we're not the same. So yeah. So what do we matter? Again, you are celebrating this year 250 years of democracy as a republic, and we are celebrating Taiwan 25 years of our first transition of power between two political parties via direct elections. So we're 10 times behind you. But democracy is a thing that once you taste it and you grab it as your own, as part of your life, it's very hard to turn back and look at the. We are really devoted and determined to keep our democracy alive, and we're ready to do whatever it takes to counter the Chinese aggression into turning us into something like Hong Kong, which is unfortunate. But again, Taiwan, this may not look, you know, I wouldn't show this to President Trump, but we are a formidable economic power. I think in terms of economic prowess, I think we already surpassed South Korea. So we should be part of the G20, but we're humble. We do maintain a large share of specifically the semiconductor manufacturing, and you know, not only in the chip manufacturing, but also we're not doing bad in design. Although most of the design is done by U.S. companies, but we're also getting to the design field. As well as you know, about 70% of the regular chips are made in Taiwan. Mostly for American companies, but also over 95% of the super chips, the advanced chips, are also physically made in Taiwan. So we are you know, but at the same time, we've been explaining to officials and relay the message that we are not competitors with you, because we basically manufacture for U.S. companies. You know, U.S. designed chips by NVIDIA, by AMD, by Intel, and we make them in Taiwan and then ship it back to the companies for them to assemble it in, you know, Apple phones or Tesla cars, etc. So actually, we're part of the supply chain, and for every dollar that a chip is sold, U.S. companies earn 38 cents, while Taiwanese companies, we earn 11 cents. Actually, so it's a good chain, you know, supply chain. Oh, wait, see, and this is just more data. You know, one thing I can say, 10 years ago, 80+% of Taiwan's outbound investment went to mainland China. Last year, 2024, it was less than 8%. Going to China. And now, last year, about 40% of our outbound investment came to the United States. So this shift away from mainland China towards other places, particularly to the United States, has been occurring for the last few years, and it'll be incrementally more prevalent as we go ahead. And one thing that I've been pushing very hard in Washington, D.C. is for the swift, or hopefully, passage of the avoidance of double taxation bill between Taiwan and the United States. I think we're the only major trading partner with the United States that does not enjoy this facility, and that's obviously a disadvantage for our companies, and also a disadvantage for U.S. companies to have their investments in Taiwan, which is also increasing, especially on the data centers and research centers. So while President Trump is using tariffs as a stick, I think the ADTA passage will be a very hefty carrot to entice our companies to come to the United States. They're already doing so. So with the passage of ADTA, you can see that will come. Especially, you're also leveling the playing field with Canada and Mexico, particularly Mexico. We have over 300 companies, manufacturing companies in Mexico. And for example, I think 80% of the world's AI servers and these big servers are assembled by Taiwanese companies in Mexico. And many of those will probably come to the United States once the conditions are right. For example, the ADTA. And again, Taiwan is the size of Maryland, but we are big in terms of trade. We are your 7th largest trading partner. We do more trade with you than that you do trade with, large countries such as India, Brazil, or very close allies such as Netherlands, France, Italy, etc. So we are formidable in terms of trading prowess, but also we're a small country, but we're one of your main importers of agricultural products. We're 7th largest, and these are just more data that what we do with the United States. Your services are also increasing in terms of exporting to Taiwan, and most of our trade is mainly on electronics, and also we are increasingly buying also more energy from the United States. We talk about asymmetric warfare, defense, but also we talk a lot about the whole society resiliency. It's not just about the military, but also about how the society can endure an aggression from outside. And for example, energy resiliency is an important thing, and we are increasing more. And you'll be reading more about Taiwan's commitment to get their source of energy from the United States. And again, jobs, we are actually partners. And the message I want to send to people is that Taiwan is an asset, it's not a liability. We're not Afghanistan, where you have to everything you have to do to keep that country alive and running. You have to put troops there. You have to keep their economy alive. You have to put a lot of money. You have to spend billions a day just keep this country running. You don't have to do it with Taiwan, obviously. We are, and also we can work together in other places. I've been telling people in DC that wherever there's Taiwan, especially embassies, there is no PRC. So it works to your advantage also for us to keep our embassies in these countries or have more presence in other countries, because we sort of are. It's like the soap, when you put it in water, it just keeps the things away. So that's Taiwan's role that we can play with the United States. And well, this is the plant in Arizona, it's the largest greenfield investment in U.S. history, $65 billion. The first plant, I think the one in the front, so it's already up and running, it's producing, I think, 5 or 6 nano chips. And the second plant is being construction, and the third plant, the groundbreaking will happen or occur sometime this year, and they'll be making the 3 nanos and eventually 2 nanos. So these are the highest end chips available so far today, and so TSMC is happily putting part of the manufacturing in U.S. soil. And there's been debate about called the silicon shield, whether even in Taiwan, whether we should concentrate most of the manufacturing in Taiwan, because that way U.S. and other countries are compelled to defend Taiwan with the Chinese, because we have a whole of the production of these very needed chips around the world, especially for AI. But having presence in the United States and Japan, in Kumamoto, for example, and also in Dresden, in my opinion, in our opinion, for government's opinion, is actually not bad, because we become part of the production chain, production part of this supply chain. and there is a expansion, a large explosion of needs for these chips anyways, and we can't make it all in Taiwan. So eventually, having factories were placed near where our main clients are, it just makes sense. But obviously, Taiwan will still be the hub, the headquarters where the newest chips will be developed. I think we're going down to the 1.5 nanos and beyond, and it will always be generated in Taiwan, with obviously collaborating with U.S. companies. So, and also, we are determined to do whatever is necessary to defend ourselves. Again, we're not Afghanistan. We've been defending against the mainland Chinese aggression for 75 years, since Mao Zedong created the PRC in October of 49. But we appreciate the help that we get from you in terms of selling arms, providing training, changing our doctrine, and in preparing ourselves for this aggression from mainland China. So the defense budget has been increasing steadily, and President Lai last week also announced publicly our intention to put our defense budget beyond 3% of our GDP. That's a commitment that we've made.
New Taiwan dollars?
That's new Taiwan dollars. So yeah. Exactly.
What would 3% represent, Mr. Minister? How much is that?
I haven't done the math.
But I was just wondering.
But I think one thing that also is worth mentioning is that our military budget, that it does not count many things that other countries put into their defense budget. For example, in Japan, they don't count, or in Japan, they do count, I think, the Coast Guard as part of the defense, budget, and we don't. A lot of things that so if we add a larger sense of what defense budget is, currently we probably already have over 3%, but we're determined to do more. We've had 80% growth since President Tsai became president. That's what it's saying. We almost double our defense budget since President Tsai.
It's about $20 billion.
Yeah, about $20 billion. In this current, obviously, we've been also developing our own arms. It's difficult for us to procure arms. You are our main arms provider, but for example, on the submarines, President Bush had announced that you would sell us or help us acquire submarines. But since you don't build diesel submarines anymore, and we've been having trouble buying submarines from other countries, so we decided to build our own with the help again from many partners, including the United States. And this is I think it's going to be it's already launched, but it will go under testing SAT, they called sometime next month. No, probably April. We'll start underwater tests, etc. But also we built our own fighter planes, and this is the advanced jet training plane. Again, with assistance from the United States, and also the very fast, what I don't know, call it hypersonic missiles, etc. And obviously nowadays no battlefield will be without UAVs. So we're doing we're collaborating with U.S. and European countries and partners to try to have what we call a non-red UAV supply chain, because nowadays most of the UAVs in the world are dominated by Chinese manufacturers, and it's very hard to have a UAV that has no Chinese components. So we are doing this clean red or no red supply chain for UAVs, and that's what we're doing now. And but at the same time, there's been some talks about that Taiwan should concentrate to procure arms that are good for the asymmetric warfare, UAVs and counter electronic warfare elements, etc. But that it's a ways to get large platforms, because it will not survive the first wave of attacks. But these platforms, in my opinion, do serve a purpose. Again, you can't win the war, or at least end the war by using these small items itself. You still need some firepower, deterrence, or even having these large platforms will probably in itself is a deterrence against them coming into Taiwan. But also it has a moral effect. When these tanks arrived, which is the picture you see, arrived in December of last year into Taiwan, the people of Taiwan were very excited to see M1 tanks, which are currently used by you, arriving in being part of our military, part of our military. So I'm sure that military recruitment for the Army probably increased considerably. And I'm looking forward to be in Greenville, South Carolina. Mm-hmm. This is where the F-16 Block 70s are being built.
Right.
We'll probably finally have the first rollout of our F-16, which was sold by President Trump during his first administration. The first F-16 Block 70 will probably roll out sometime this year. And when it comes out again, it will bring a lot of excitement to Taiwanese people, a lot of confidence building. And I was telling my U.S. friends, can we get Tom Cruise over there? Although he didn't fly an F-16, he flew what, Tomcats and Hornets, yeah. But again, it's the symbolism, that will help it, and that it's in itself. That obviously we hope we will never use it, but it brings a psychological effect to the people, which is important. And obviously the whole of society resiliency, which is again not only about the military, but how the society will perform or maintain the daily lives as normal as possible under duress. And we've learned this a lot from Ukraine, but also learning from other countries, the Nordic countries, which are very good at civil defense, and other best practices from other partners. The United States has been helping us a lot also on this area, but also energy. There's been talk about obviously buying more energy from the United States, but also the current government is against nuclear energy, but obviously we're open to the new type of nuclear generations, which are I think the smaller and cleaner ones, but also other transportation or links to the satellite, our telecommunications. You may have read or heard about the Chinese as being, someone we suspiciously, but we obviously would suspect that the Chinese are doing this. They've been cutting our cables, our underground, undersea cable between Taiwan and our outlying islands. And one had just happened a couple of days ago. Always Chinese manned ships, and they have this very similar occurrences in Northern Europe, where also similar things are happening, just cable being cut by. And we tracked one of the ships, which was loitering outside of Keelung Harbor in the north, and this ship was just loitering. Every time the ship turned, there was a cable underneath. So, and then finally he reached one point and then he cut one of the cables and ran away towards China. So this is part of the gray zone area that we're working, and that we hopefully will strengthen with, again, help and assistance and advice from friends such as the United States. So that's basically my PowerPoint, and happy to entertain any questions that you have. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much. This was very comprehensive, very lucid, and with many elements of encouragement for the future. Jim, do you have any questions you want to pose, I think?
Well, I do. It's interesting. We talk in terms of gray zone. It's getting a little less gray here with the most recent seizure of the ship and the crew that you found cutting cables. How much can you tell us about the dialogue with the mainland over return, or how do you see that being resolved going forward? Is there a conversation underway? I know perhaps you can't share all that.
It's difficult because PRC has actually, ever since President Tsai assumed her role as president, the communications, at least at high levels between Taiwan and PRC, has basically stopped. Obviously, at the at the working level, between the police, between Coast Guard, there's still communications because they're still, again, we share the same seas, and we have islands that are very near their coast, such as Matsu and Jingmen, and then things happen and they have to sort it out. People straying into our islands or people straying into their coast, etc. So there's some form of communication between at the working level, but at the higher levels, it isn't happening. My assumption is because PRC has never acknowledged Taiwan as obviously as an independent sovereign entity, but rather that Taiwan is still a domestic issue, a war between KMT and the CCP for them. So they're willing to talk to KMT people, but not with any other party, even if that party is in government. They don't recognize it. They refuse to recognize that Taiwan's being governed by anybody else, and so they only talk to KMT people. And as you can also see that during President Ma, obviously the interaction was very fluid, very 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 active, and very But I think even if TPP won the presidency, I don't think they will talk to them because they refuse to acknowledge that Taiwan's being it works as a separate entity. So what will happen with the ships, with the crew of the ship that was cutting cables, and I think it will go through a long and tedious process. Eventually, what will happen, I don't know, but there is mechanisms that that can make the return or happen. And for example, there was a ship that had that our Coast Guard was chasing because they were illegally in waters and came in, but that ship flipped and two sailors died. Which funny, these two so-called sailors, they were from inland. They were not from Xiamen. They didn't the crews didn't know how to swim. So what were they doing in those ships? I know. But anyways. But eventually, it was sorted out, about how to deal with the deceased sailors, how to return them to China, and etc. So there are mechanisms, but again, it's a very hard and tedious because there are no formal communications.
I see. But you raise a point there that leads to another question, if I might, Larry. Clearly. You portrayed a picture of some urgency and compellence with which we agree. And, as you noted, I've been a part of Taiwan's future for many, many years. But it's still interesting, and maybe it's a sign of a vibrant democracy. The internal political issues are still, I said in a recent gathering focused on Taiwan that, we used to say in the U.S. all politics are local, but in Taiwan's case, they're never local. They're always international because people are watching from outside how these actions take place. Is your sense that there's resolution and ahead for that as Taiwan confronts the realities of the situation in which it finds itself?
Exactly. As you mentioned, Congressman Molinar, who is the chairman of the China Committee, the U.S. Against China Committee, and Krishnamurti, both of them were at the Brookings event last few days when they both talked about exactly what you said. That while they respected Taiwanese democracy at work, but it was concerning message that we're sending outside of Taiwan that although it was the opposition trying to block or do something about our budget, especially on the defense budget, but for the outside, it's like it's Taiwan, not having or not determined to defend itself because the budget is actually not increasing but decreasing. But the details doesn't matter; it's the outcome. So, but KMT actually sent. Actually, I think they're in DC right now. KMT sent a delegation to Washington. Three of them are the vice president or deputy, Yeah, the deputy vice president of the KMT is Mr. Shah, along with he was also the deputy defense minister. So actually, there are three deputy ministers, former under KMT government, who are in DC right now. I think again, I can't speak about for them, but I'm sure that what the message they're trying to convey to Washington is KMT is also resolute and determined to have a strong defense. But actually, they haven't really deleted or decreased the budget for defense, but rather they froze the budget, especially on the submarine. They have this opinion about whether we're spending too much money on building this. I think we're trying to build 8 submarines. So they put a freeze on the Navy being able to access a certain part of the budget in the condition that they meet requirements by stage. For example, they're going for undersea trials very soon, and once that is completed, then the legislation will unfreeze the next tranche of money, etc. So they're not deleting, they're not suppressing, but I think their explanation is that they want to make sure that the money is well spent and not, And part of the problem is the military has been procuring or putting money, in their budget for purchases, and unfortunately that's a problem that we have with the U.S. is we make purchases that you have announced for us to sell us, but it takes quite a long time for them to reach Taiwan, and the M1A2s, others, the missiles, the aircraft. So many times, for example, Air Force puts a budget for buying so many F-16s this year, or payment for receiving. They're scheduled to arrive this year, but they don't. So they have to return the money to the coffers, and then they're criticized by legislature saying, but why are you doing? Obviously, it's not particularly Air Force's fault, but that's what happens, and they criticize they get criticized. But again, it's probably also expected that the opposition will try to make life as difficult as possible for the ruling party. But at the end, I think even KMT and TPP are aware that sending a strong message overseas, to our friends, especially, that we are determined to have better defenses is a consensus in Taiwan. So I think that's the role of the delegation from KMT, who is doing that right now in DC.
Mr. Ambassador, what are the highest priorities that you have for the U.S.-Taiwan bilateral relationship? You mentioned trade. Maybe you could say a little bit more about where that stands now, and how imminent a full agreement may be or not. And then maybe we can talk a little bit about what needs to be done in terms of assisting you to be more resilient in rebuffing gray zone activity. But how would you prioritize your aspirations for the U.S.?
Well, the priority that I have in D.C. would be obviously on national security and defense, obviously, because that's an existential issue for Taiwan, and to make sure that Taiwan's peace stability this position is shared by the United States and its allies in Japan, Korea, and now Philippines, which I think that has been an encouraging development. It's more and more coordination also with AUKUS and the Quad and all the countries, even European countries. And you've seen that now in most of these bilateral, multilateral meetings that occur between U.S. and the partners. For example, the trilateral meeting between Secretary Rubio and its partners counterparts in Japanese and Korean foreign ministers in Munich, on when they released the statement, it included peace and stability in Taiwan, opposed to any unilateral change of the status quo, particularly by military means, which is, and also when President Trump met with Prime Minister Ishiba, and then the joint declaration had exactly the same wordings, and also the G7 meetings, etc. So that's particularly essential for Taiwan. So we have more and more friends and more support to maintain the status quo in the Taiwan Straits and not allow, So for example, there were talks about, like, as if it was a big scandal that the State Department deleted the phrase that United States does not support Taiwan independence. It's a big thing, but actually, again, the U.S. has explained that it hasn't changed anything. The position of the United States has maintained the same, but it's not necessary for them to spell out each and every aspect of what status quo is. So they're on the bottom part of the re-edited page from State Department, states United States against change, any bilateral change of status quo, etc., etc. So that itself explains it. But on the economic side, as you know, President Trump, when he was a candidate, at this time he's being mentioned in Taiwan many times, and also as president, he also mentioned Taiwan. Even when he was signing the executive order on adding tariffs a couple of weeks ago, he mentioned Taiwan as an example, especially in the semiconductors. And obviously, we try to lay low, but almost impossible. President Trump has mentioned, Taiwan is Taiwan's like the tip of this pen, and in China it's like this table. So which one should we, it's obvious which one we should take put more attention to, or Taiwan and China are so near, and the United States is so far away from Taiwan. So if there's ever a conflict, it's, as we say in Chinese, Mandarin, a distant water doesn't help, imminent or closer fires. But and also he's been very critical about semiconductor. He said that Taiwan has in one occasion he said Taiwan stole the semiconductor manufacturing away from the U.S. as well as jobs. So he wants it back, and if we don't comply, he said we will not be very happy. So obviously these are words that are obviously of concern to Taiwan, of the people and government. But obviously, and unfortunately, we don't have the means to be able to talk directly to President Trump the way the Israeli Prime Minister was. He was the first head of state being received by President Trump, or as Prime Minister Ishiba is able to talk directly to President Trump, or etc. All the ones that followed. So we don't have that access for obvious reasons. But we have been talking to the administration, and President Lai, I think he made a public statement maybe a week ago about that. That we're willing to go in that direction. Have more presence in the United States, manufacturing, more about energy and more about trade and etc. and partners, and also I think we're going in that direction. There's been some reports, on what role TSMC or even Foxconn is in talks with certain companies. Obviously, all of that may not necessarily be, but the fact that there's something brewing, it is. We are talking, and there's conversations, and I guess when the time comes, it will probably be announced publicly. But again. And I told my colleagues at TechRoom, says, well, actually President Trump mentioned Taiwan, obviously, so far all negative, but it's not necessarily a bad thing, because of all the 190 6 countries in the world. For the President of the United States to mention this country by name is not easy. But at least he has Taiwan in mind, which is, again, that will eventually, I think, reach something that is agreeable for both sides.
Good. Well, I'm going to open it up now to our audience here. If anyone wants to ask a question, we don't have tent cards, but I'll call on you. I'll just say that you have a lot of friends on Capitol Hill.
I know.
You know that. Sure. I know that. We all know that. You have a lot of goodwill there.
Yes.
You can talk to Capitol Hill, and I'm sure you spend a lot of time doing so. And you have a lot of friends in the administration too, yes. Including one who was a contributor to our report, The Boiling Moat.
Oh, yeah.
That Matt Pottinger edited.
It was just in Taiwan, actually.
Yes. And that is, I think, a very powerful statement about what needs to be done by all actors on the democratic side, from Taiwan to the U.S. to Japan and so on, to secure Taiwan. So we don't want to be too overly worried about where the U.S. stands. Anyway, David, why don't you start? And if others have questions, you can raise your hands. And for our online audience, if you have any questions, you can post them in the Q&A mechanism on our online video. And for our Hoover colleagues, I think you can turn off the slides now and put the camera front and center. Go ahead, David.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for being here today. David Fedor at the Hoover Institution.
Pleasure.
And I just say I tend to agree that in the sort of broad arc of things, the more that Taiwan is on the minds of the American people and its leadership, sort of whether left or right, the better. A high-level question. I mean, in your presentation, you described, I think, a trend, a generally positive trend in the nature of U.S.-Taiwanese relationships over these recent years, and
sure.
In a generally negative trend in the Taiwan PRC relationship. You spoke about some of your near-term policy priorities, but could you share your vision in the sort of longer-term, 5 to 10 year time frame for Taiwan's relationship with the U.S. And if you'd like, you can speak to the PRC relationship as well, but I'm most interested in the U.S. side.
Well, first of all, I think this uncertainty about President Trump's what he expects from Taiwan, I think this will be dealt with in the first quarter. It will be dealt with, So I put a positive fact that although, again, we can have President Lai be at the White House and have this handshake with him, say, we announced like Japan did or what India did. But obviously we have our own ways of dealing with them. We've learned throughout the years. And again, after 1979, when diplomatic relations ended, and some of you may have been in government during that time, and it was a low point of Taiwan-U.S. relations, and we couldn't even go into federal buildings to talk with officials. We had to meet at cafes and restaurants, and then we slowly crawled back and to where we are today, where basically I have access to almost all all buildings and be able to talk. There's still some ceilings we have to overcome, and for the next few years, I hope that we can have greater access or less limitations and act more. Again, it's a fact that we don't have diplomatic relations, but in reality, we are very good partners, and we are, allies in values and partners in security and in technology, or even indispensable collaborators. You talk about AI and Stargate and all this. You can't talk about this without talking about Taiwan. because we are part of this technology development, and so I think that the relations will only increase further and further. I mean, but again, the description on Taiwan-U.S. relations in the last few years as being called rock solid. When we describe the rock solid relations between Taiwan and the United States. But I did complain to U.S. officials that, yeah, okay, that's good, but when you describe U.S.-Japan relations, you mention it as steel clad, and between steel and rock, I think we still have ways to go. So my mission for the next few years, or for Taiwan, is to make it steel clad eventually. But I think, again, the outlook is good, and again, and I can't stress enough the importance of, and maybe many of you are doing this already with the Silicon Valley, Taiwan, and Semiconductors Alliance and all that, but to maintain an edge, or not let the Chinese catch up with what you and I are doing in terms of technology, is very important. AI will be, again, many of you probably, you're experts here. I can, but AI will be part of our lives, and how they evolve in our daily surroundings and what we do. Obviously, we want this system to be a healthy one, and a good one, and one that helps us and not control us. And what the Chinese do with technology basically is to try to control or to manipulate, and which is not the direction we wanted to go. Again, from what limited knowledge that I have on technology, but the Chinese, they've tried. They spend billions of dollars to try to replicate TSMC, and they can't. They've hired TSMC leadership, managers, hired TSMC engineers. They spend billions on machines and etc. But they've failed in more than one occasion to try to replicate. They even boasted that they would buy TSMC eventually, but obviously not. All these companies are broke. And DeepSeek, they say they spend on $6 million, and that's not true, because they actually used other platforms and used Taiwanese-made.
There's a lot of hype around it.
Yeah, but again, they're good. I mean, they're good, but at generating technology, they can. But once they have their hands on technology, they can, I'm going to see, replicate it and modify it, etc. Look at for example, the German industry, which is, again, they put all their eggs, or at least most of the eggs, on China. It's a huge market. Let's put the manufacturing, the cars, and and now they're in deep trouble. They're even about, they were talking recently about closing the plants in Germany because and they're being beat in the markets in China, which most of their earnings come from China now. But they're so deeply entrenched they can't pull back, and that's a warning sign from other countries. I think Korea is about in the same situation. So yeah.
All right, we'll go to Lanny Chen and then one of our questioners from online.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Larry. Ambassador, welcome. Thank you for coming to Hoover. I'm Lanhee Chen. I'm a fellow here at the Hoover Institution. I've been here for over a decade now. Can't believe that. But had the pleasure of joining Admiral Ellis and Larry in Taiwan on our trip last year. I have one observation and a question. My observation is that I think amongst stakeholders in Washington, and amongst this administration in particular, the message on the primacy of the U.S.-Taiwan security relationship is well understood. I'm less convinced that the economic message is being well received. And so if I had a piece of advice to you and your colleagues, it would be to continue to develop with the economic leaders of this administration the value of the U.S.-Taiwan economic relationship. Because I think that this administration in particular is quite focused on questions around economic relationships with our partners around the world, and particularly the benefit of those relationships for the American people. And so I think that's crucially important. My question is really about your view on Taiwan's positioning in the international community, and particularly with international organizations. I continue to be alarmed by the way in which China is undergoing its systematic effort to continue to block Taiwan's participation in international organizations. We know about the World Health Organization. That's something that we saw during COVID, how problematic that was. But I'm concerned, for example, about Taiwan's inability to participate in ICAO. When you look at the percentage of air traffic that moves through the Taiwan FIR, I think that's a great concern. So I think in the United States, Congress is doing what it can through the Taipei Act and through other means to elevate this conversation around IOs. But I'd like to hear a little bit about what the administration, what the Taiwanese administration's approach is on IOs, and if you have any good news to report on that front.
Well, first, thank you for your observation. Indeed, it is something we are working. Again, in a very methodical, but also so far under the table or under the are we calling Chinese like a duck swimming? You don't see the food. Well, that's what we're trying to do now.
We refer to that at Stanford as the duck syndrome.
Oh, the duck syndrome. Okay.
Yeah, the surface water is very calm, but beneath the duck is paddling furiously.
So yeah. But again, I think it's important that besides the talks, engagement with the administration behind doors, but that the public needs to also be, because again, at the end, it's American public, the American workers that will benefit, and this rhetoric about we stealing away your jobs is obviously it's a negative. So yeah, that's something we should do more. But again, hopefully, in not too distant future, more positive consensuses will be announced. And sometimes, again, as government, we talk and we try to communicate, but at the same time, Taiwanese companies, they're big enough that they don't really need our we don't have to hold their hands. I need to have them hold my hand. TSMC, but again, but obviously in a loose sense, there's some conversations between what we think is good for the greater good of Taiwan, and obviously each company has its own interest at stake, but I think they'll go in that direction, and hopefully things will come to light, and President Trump will start have a different, or at least publicly. Again, he's very clear on what China is. The last weekend's release of Make America was an America First investment policy. It's 80% is on the PRC's as a threat to the United States, etc. So there's somebody say, "Oh no, I'm sure this President Trump didn't read it because he can't." But I they wouldn't release something if it wasn't, approved. But on your part about international organizations, indeed, PRC has been trying to, obviously. I worked as head of the Geneva office during President Ma's term. At that time, we had access. We are observers to the World Health Assembly every year. So my health minister will be in town. I would sit with him. That was something very touching and moving for me to be able to sit at the Palais de la Nation with my health minister and see him go up to the podium and talk about Taiwan. Obviously, that had ended when DPP came to power. Again. This notion that the PRC doesn't recognize anybody else but the KMT on Taiwan, so I back then was reporting to Taipei that although during President Ma's time, again, the expression between Taiwan and mainland China was 两岸一家亲, like two sides are just one family, and things were rosy and very nice, but I reported to Taipei that the waters are very cold in Geneva because the Chinese will try still do whatever they can to block us from participating in activities besides the one, for example, WHO, which there was some sort of consensus, but in others they were still, because why? Because obviously it's obvious way of showing that Taiwan is a sovereign entity away from mainland China. When we sit at different tables and we have, even though it's Chinese Taipei, but people recognize as Taiwan representative, and so they didn't like that at all. So again, and now somebody had this brilliant idea of using resolutions 2758, which is a resolution 1971 that decided who would sit on China's desk at the United Nations, which obviously we were kicked out of the United Nations in 1971, and that resolution allowed PRC to sit on China's pupil, but that didn't mention anything about what Taiwan would be. Only resolve who sits on China's position. But the Chinese PRC has been saying, oh, that actually also resolved that Taiwan internationally on legal grounds that Taiwan belongs to the PRC because of it, which is false. There's no mention of Taiwan, no mention of ROC. They only mention Chiang Kai-shek's representatives, etc. So, and they be using, we call it lawfare. They be using that as a sort of a international legal grounds that they own Taiwan. But again, the United States has come out in the last few years, especially last year, very at different levels. At the State Department, even Assistant Secretary, I think even the Secretary of State mentioned about something about 2758 being that, again, it was not China was trying to model the concepts of who Taiwan belonged to, etc. So the encouraging part is that the U.S. has been involved in debunking this. Earlier this year in January, when at the World Health Organization's steering committee in January, the United States also spoke very. So this is already under President Trump's administration. They spoke also very clearly about, again, not agreeing with China's claims and 2758 being, they're trying to debunk the notion that 2758 was a proof that Taiwan belonged to them, etc. So I think that will continue to be. Obviously, the United States, the current administration, being reluctant to be more engaged in international organizations. Some for good reason, because United States, PRC has just too much influence, within the secretariats of these international organizations. Sure. Too much influence. For example, the United States pays for a quarter of WHO's finances, and China pays maybe less than 1% of their money for their budget. But yet China has just overwhelming influence within the Secretariat, and they have their ways. But also, in many ways, the Chinese nationals who work at these international organizations, who are supposed to be working for the benefit of that, to enhance the work of that organizations, but yet they still work for the CCP, and that's the difference. The United Nations, they always have a vice president or Deputy Secretary General who is a Chinese national, and that's his role, is just to enhance Chinese presence. When I was head of office in Geneva, at that time the Secretary General of WHO was Margaret Chan. She's distinguished health official from Hong Kong, but in her office they had put this senior advisor who was a Chinese diplomat, and his role was, as you know, many of you who know China, the person who really calls the shots in an institution in China is not the minister, or nor the mayor, nor the governor, but the political officer that in charge of that office, or even So they put this gentleman at Margaret Chan's office. He was screening everything for her, including Taiwanese. And this gentleman's name is Fu Cong. So when I left Geneva, when I went to Belgium 2 years ago, he was the Chinese representative in Belgium too. I go, oh, what a coincidence! And then I came to the United States. Now he's a Chinese UN representative.
They're trailing you.
Yeah, stop following me, please. No, but that's how they work. So that's why you know, there is a reason. You know, I sort of understand why President Trump is very, you know, negative on international relations, because again, it's unreasonable to have the UN Human Rights Committee, and all the members are the worst. The worst human rights violators are members of that committee. You know, it's a joke, but so I guess some form of reform needs to be done. But we want to be included because, again, we are part of this global village. We want to hear what's going on. We also want to contribute what we can in health and, you know, in ICAO, in international flights, and even Interpol, etc. So you know, so again, it is our intention to continue. United States, in general speaking, we still supports Taiwan's international party. Again, you have a different position on international relations, but they still support Taiwan's inclusion.
Okay, thank you for that. You're an economic, technological, and moral leader in the world. You have a right to be included.
Thank you.
A couple of questions from Voice of America China Division reporter Tina Chung. The first, I think you've spoken to a bit in your last two answers, but she asked the Trump administration has now been in office for a few weeks. You know, how would you characterize U.S.-Taiwan relations right now? You can say something more about that if you want to, but the second question I'd particularly like you to answer, she wants your response to the statement, one of many famous statements, by China's defense ministry yesterday,
just now, yes.
And a warning to Taiwan's government, claiming that Taiwan's government is seeking independence by relying on America's help, saying, sooner or later we will get you. Do you have a response to that?
Well, again, don't be fooled by just because they're bringing pandas that they're different now. That position has never changed. The statement about we'll get you eventually is what they've shot for always. So again, we're determined to maintain our way of life. The fact that we are in Taiwan, having elections, free elections, people are able to speak their minds, is something that the Chinese citizens don't have, and that's why actually we pose a threat to the CCP's legitimacy in mainland China. And that's, in my opinion, that's also the reason why the PRC was willing to abrogate the treaty that they signed with UK when they were returning Hong Kong to China as a colony. They promised to keep Hong Kong as is for 50 years, and they abrogated that agreement because the same thing, the Chinese saw in Hong Kong that not as a territory of China, that people in Hong Kong could have different lifestyles than the Chinese on mainland China. Though they were small, but the effect that it caused in China, I think, would have been devastating if people started to doubt, why can't we have the same things on mainland China? So they decided, let's turn Hong Kong into any other Chinese city. And that's what they've done, unfortunately. And Taiwan is still, again, we're a beacon of hope for the Chinese people in general, that there are different ways of doing things, different ways. We can choose our leader. If we don't like what they're doing, we can speak our minds. We can have very, very lively opposition in Congress. You know, our legislature is very physical, as you know, literally very physical. But again, it's better for our legislature to be fist fighting in Congress than the people in general fighting on the streets. So let them fight, and things will be good. And so again, you can try to have a taste of what we in Taiwan are doing, and you'll like it. So yeah, So, anyways, but on Taiwan-U.S. relations, again, we have many, as you mentioned, we have many friends in Congress and in the executive, and they all realize what China means to the United States. It's a threat. They're adversaries. Taiwan is a partner. And again, I want to repeat that the United States, Taiwan is an asset, not a liability, and working together will enhance what you want to achieve. And what we want to is basically live in peace and stable in Taiwan Straits. So yeah, that's, again, you mentioned about friends. Just one example, January 15th, United States Congress, just into the first in the new 119th session of Congress, and they put a priority to try to pass in the House of Representatives the avoidance of double taxation bill. It was put in priority, but voted January 15th, and out of that day, was the vote for Taiwan, the ADTA was 423 votes to 1.
Wow.
Which is, there's 435 members of Congress, 423 voted in favor of this bill. Well, this was one, and I was, who the hell is this one? I'm sorry, man. And it's a gentleman from Kentucky, Representative Massey, and I was told he's, well, anyways, I respect his opinion, but again, that's just a very very illustrative way of showing the friends we have in Washington D.C.
You don't get a vote like that except for a resolution to reaffirm Mother's Day as the day honoring our mothers.
Thank you. Yes.
I think we have time for only one last question, if there's anything brief.
Yeah.
And if not, I will, just give you a chance to make any final comment you wish, or maybe any reflection on the CHIPS Act and where we stand with that.
Well, CHIPS Act, again, I know the current administration has a different view of how CHIPS Act should be executed. President Trump said that he was not for giving money to financial incentives to the companies. But again, there's a stick, but there's also a carrot. And again, I still plead for Senate to prove the avoidance of double taxation as quickly as possible. I read the House of Representatives already did so January 15th. On January 25th, the Foreign Affairs Committee and the
Senate Foreign
Affairs and House of introduced, along with the they introduced a bill that has the exact content as the House, meaning that they don't have to reconciliate the text, but still finding ways to reach the floor. So we hopefully that will pass soon, and that will be, again, a big carrot to incentivize our companies to come to the United States, which we are already doing so. So it will be a good incentive, but it's relevant. The CHIPS Act is to help. Actually, TSMC's presence in Arizona started with President Trump's term when they were invited by President Trump's administration to come to Arizona. And obviously there are some incentives. I'm sorry, Arizona offers some incentives, but it has not been easy at the beginning. One thing I want to stress is Taiwan and U.S. were doing, also pushing strong on generating talents, just formation of human capable labor force to man these factories. Actually, there's not enough of them, and the speed by which TSMC's Arizona plants are functioning depends on how many people they can get to man these factories, and there are not enough of them. So the first thing they did, TSMC, was to partner with ASU to try to generate, but also we're doing so cross country with Texas A&M system, TU, with Purdue, etc., Illinois, and all different. And I'm sure here in California, we're also probably partnering with many colleges to try to form. We don't have enough engineers for manufacturing semiconductors in Taiwan itself. We don't have enough, so we're trying to do that, and that is an important factor because what's coming with AI and Stargate and all these, advanced technologies. We'll need a lot of them, and working together is important.
That was a major theme of our report, Silicon Triangle. Okay. We need more electrical engineers in the United States. In any case, I think one of the things that 423-1 vote in the House reflects is the depth and complexity of the U.S.-Taiwan partnership, that it's based not only on common interests, but common values. Representative Yu, thank you so much for being with us and for the work you're doing. And again, thank you to